Last one. Well, maybe. I mean, I don't know. We're getting closed for 2 weeks. We're getting closed to 6 weeks. I don't know. Anyway, this is the last lecture that I'm recording during spring break. So I don't even know if we're going to close or not. So here's lecture number 6. And this one, you know what? This one will be much better in person. And I'm going to recommend, if we're actually still closed for this one, I'm going to recommend a ton of videos because we're doing dinosaurs today. What's up? All right, let's go. Let's go. That's me kicking a chair for the noise. Let's go. So pull up your PowerPoint, put it over there, over here, and let's do some amniotes and ecosystems. Whip this open to the objectives, and let's talk about amniotic eggs and ecology. So list the clades of the amniotes. That'd be the reptiles, the dinosaurs, the birds, and the mammals. You want to list some clades of reptiles? It's going to be the turtles, it's going to be the crocodiles and alligators, it's going to be the lizards, it's going to be the snakes. We're going to cover the birds, but not a lot of birds. You know who you got to talk to about birds? Talk to Dr. Friesen. Okay, we'll cover that, but I want you to identify characteristics of each. Be able to define any term specific to each clade. If I say scales, you say lizards and snakes and alligators, and I probably could just say reptiles. I say amniotic eggs, you're going to say it's birds, dinosaurs, and reptiles. You're going to get this stuff. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a little matching and ID of different animals by their fossils. This is going to be fun. Draw and label an amniotic egg. That's a lot of terms. Okay? That is some A and P grade stuff right there. So draw and label that amniotic egg. Yeah. And if you want to, you can just crack open an egg while you're home. Have yourself an omelet during this lecture. It's the fun part of having lectures at home. List the clades of mammals. Okay, to an extent. To an extent. Because we're going to do those more later. Identify characteristics of each. Be able to define a term specific to that. To an extent. Give examples of how evolution of new characteristics has transformed ecosystems. Yeah, definitely. We're covering that one. Define terms such as adaptive radiation, ecosystem, and extinction. All right, advanced slide. We have a time and a place for evolution, and that time and the place is the end, is during the Permian. So the Permian extinction. I kicked this chair, now it's time for me to bring it back. The Permian extinction. So onto this barren land. The Permian extinction wipes out 90% of life on Earth. So we've got amphibians have just colonized this wonderful new area. There are plenty of trees, the lycophyte trees, the ferns are everywhere, the pine trees are just getting started, and life is good, and life is plentiful, and 90% of that stuff gets wiped out. So we are done. 90% of life, boom. And you thought the COVID-19 was bad with a 2% fatality rate, maybe 3%? No, 90% fatality rate, boom, permanent extinction, mic drop on life. That's it, right? No, that's not it. Because even though there is barren land, dry and desiccated terrestrial ecosystems, devastated forests, clouds of ash, poisonous waters, life still survives. And life is going to evolve here. So after this period, animals need to deal with desiccation in a whole new light. The scorching light of the sun. So they need to deal with desiccation, and we are going to see different methods of dealing with desiccation being the adaptations of the reptiles, the birds, the dinosaurs, and the mammals. We're going to see these as methods of dealing with drought, dryness, and dry, scaly skins, nothing compared to what these guys had to deal with. All right, advanced slide. The amniotic egg. Put a shell on it. We are going to get an egg that can be surviving under these harsh conditions. If you remember what I said 20 minutes ago, my time, 2 days ago, your time, it's that amphibian eggs dry out very easily. So we need something that won't, and that's the amniotic egg. So we have the features of the amniotic egg. Besides the shell, the allantoid. There's going to be a spot for waste disposal inside the egg. The amnion. A fluid-filled cavity to protect from external shocks that don't break it. Remember, the first eggs aren't going to be this hard-shelled, easily cracked thing that you buy in the supermarket. No, the first egg's going to have these leathery shells, and these leathery shells are going to be a lot harder to crack. So this albumin is actually, this amnion is going to protect it from the shocks, and that's the amniotic. part of the amnion egg. The allantois keeping the disposal of waste away from parts where we're doing gas exchange and nutrients. So here we go, the chorion allows for a gas exchange. And that's good because a hard-shelled egg, too hard of a shell, is going to basically entomb the embryo. And that just leads to death. So, you know, this needs to have some level of gas exchange. And then, of course, just like the seed, the yolk sac. Yeah, so that's right. This is kind of like the seed. What does the seed do? It nourishes and protects. What does an egg do? It nourishes and protects. So there you have an embryo in each. So glad you came alongside us, animals. So glad you got seeds just like us, except you don't plant an egg, unless, of course, you're burying it in the warm sand, in which case, you know what? That's kind of cool, actually. We do plant turtle eggs. Okay, anyway, moving on. Turtle eggs, reptiles. Reptiles have amniotic eggs, dry skin, ready for a terrestrial lifestyle. Let's advance the slide and move to the reptiles. All right, reptiles. What are some functions, what are some things here? They've got scales and shedding. So they actually have to shed their skin. It's almost like an exoskeleton, besides the fact it's not a skeleton, but it's almost like a cuticle, besides the fact that it's not really a cuticle. It's just a scaly external part that occasionally needs to be shed. So the shedding of the skin, it can be a bit difficult for them to get all this skin, you know, off, and generally they do it in like a certain time period where they're going to shed all of their skin at once. Sometimes the scaly skin, when shedding, gets stuck. That's a very specific problem. That is a reptile dysfunction. It is a specific problem to reptiles. There are endotherms and ectotherms in the reptiles. Most of them, however, are ectotherms, getting their warmth from without. We do know they have amniotic eggs. They also have internal fertilization. Remember, if you will, the internal fertilization, the double fertilization of the angiosperms. Remember, if you will, the release of the sperm by the male gametophyte on the gymnosperms. Remember, this is basically internal fertilization for gymnosperms and angiosperms as an adaptation to a terrestrial life cycle, that they don't need their sperms and eggs to be free swimming. The same thing here is true of the reptiles. If you look at frogs and toads mating, they often do so in a free swimming manner in the ocean, in the water, where they're going to just squirt out their sperm and eggs into the water and they'll fertilize externally. No, reptiles here are doing internal fertilization in much the same way as gymnosperms and angiosperms. It's an adaptation for living in an environment that tends to desiccate. And they also have something called rib cage ventilation. Amphibians have positive pressure ventilation, where they swallow their air. Rib cage ventilation means the intercostal muscles that connect the ribs will actually pull out, and the diaphragm will pull down to ventilate the area that is inside the ribs, i.e. the lungs. So this is what we're going to have in terms of the reptiles, this negative pressure ventilation as opposed to positive pressure ventilation, and it's going to use a rib cage instead of just swallowing air into the air bladder. So that's what the reptiles are, and those are the traits of a reptile that I want you guys to know. Now, let's move on to something a little more fun. Here we go. This is why I'm so excited today, because we're going to discuss dinosaurs. What makes a dinosaur? Well, that would be the hip bone structure. And there are two clades within that, the ornithischian and the saurischian. So the ornithischian and saurischian clades are two different types of dinosaurs. The ornithischian, think ornith, like bird, and fischian, or ischian, which is hips. Ornithischians had what we call bird hips. Now, fun fact, they didn't give rise to the birds, but the hips are more bird-like. The saurischian, the lizard-hipped dinosaurs are actually, ironically, the ones that would give rise to later birds. These two groups of dinosaurs were actually very successful because being terrestrial and being able to move around more efficiently and faster, they had a great advantage over reptiles. So you see this picture here of a dinosaur that has managed to catch a lizard. It's just they could move faster. Not all of them were bipedal, but the shape of the hips, both fore and aft, do you think fore and aft? Yeah, you have two hips if you have four legs. The shape of these hips allowed for more efficient locomotion. It allowed for more quick, movement out of hot sunlight into shade for temperature regulation. It allowed for more efficient movement and migration looking for food sources. It allowed for, faster predation. So these are some powerful adaptations based on the structure of the hips. And these powerful adaptations, advanced slide, allowed for what we call an adaptive radiation. Do I want to write that one down? Yeah, I do. Adaptive radiation. An adaptive radiation is when there are a lot of niches open so one successful group is going to occupy a lot of those niches. So having these superior hips allows them during the early Triassic to greatly expand into every different shape and size. From things like the Pisanosaurus, Lesosaurus, Scutellosaurus, and Amniotes, these more kind of ancient reptiles which able to move quickly on four legs, but still not the ones we generally think of, to things like the Stegosaurids, the Nodosaurids, the Ankylosaurids, these ones moving more slowly on four legs, but also getting later adaptations for defense against predators. Then we have things like the Hypsilophodontae, the Dryosauridae, the Iguanodons. Basically these large hadrosaurs were later able to have additional adaptations such as potentially group living, group nesting, herding kind of behaviors, as well as advanced mating calls and such. So they actually derived into a very different clade from these Ankylosaurids. So there are a whole bunch of different types of dinosaurs because this hip bone structure and the open niches allowed them to really enjoy the whole land. Think about it this way. Before the Triassic, what large grazing animals were there? Nope. There just wasn't a large grazing animal. So the evolution of large grazing animals, such as the stegosaurids, and larger grazing animals, such as the Diplodocodidae and the Brachiosauridae, Titanosauridae, Apatosaurs, and whatnot, these large grazing animals opened a new niche that they were then able to occupy and fully exploit. One hypothesis as to why they may have grown so big is simply that the bigger they got, the fewer predators could actually bring one down. So they were hypothesized to be ectothermic as well, so having a lower calorie cost and more efficient production efficiency would allow them to not need as much food as, say, something like an elephant would need now. Then, of course, you have all these predators. The Ceratosauridae, the Spinosauridae, Allosauridae, Tyrannosauridae, of course we know that one, Dromaeosauridae, Troodontidae. These, as you look at these theropods, though, what you're noticing is the shape, these grasping limbs, these grasping forelimbs, these fast-running hind limbs, this kind of off-balance, which may result in kind of a bobbing back and forth. You're noticing more and more bird-like features. If you want to compare them maybe to an emu or an ostrich or something, these fast-running, smaller front limbs, longer hind limbs. Yeah. So these are more and more bird-like animals, and some groups from these would actually give rise to an Ornithurae, far on the side over there, birds. So they would evolve out from these dinosaurs. So realistically, what you see in you see the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous period. In the Mesozoic, you see the dinosaurs just dominating. And that's what happens with some types of life. So we've seen before these jawed fish dominating the oceans. Great. The jawed fish dominated the oceans for quite some time until other things could take some of their niches. We didn't actually really look into the early arthropods dominating the land, but the early arthropods did dominate the land once they actually got up here. So You see the great rise of the insect, the filling of many niches by the insects, and then the insects are being dominated after the permanent extinctions by these dinosaurs. This was the time of the dinosaurs. There was an adaptive radiation, there was a wide filling of niches, there was a great amount of speciation, and they were just the dominant animals. And that's it. Dinosaurs lived forever, right? Well, it wasn't just dinosaurs at the time, and we'll get to live forever. Advanced slide. There were also different types of reptiles during this time period. So Mesozoic reptiles also lived. So there were pterosaurs in the skies. Pterosaurs dominated the skies. Yes, there were birds, but they were mainly relegated to smaller roles. There weren't any of these large ocean-going fishing birds. So albatrosses would evolve much later. There were pterosaurs doing this at the time. So in the oceans, you have things like the chronosaurs and the plesiosaurs and the ichthyosaurs. These are lizards, not dinosaurs, that had secondarily evolved to return to the ocean. So they are air-breathing reptiles that are in the ocean. Very large animals able to dominate the ecosystems here. So you can see that actually this Chronosaurus has these 4 limbs that were used for propulsion. That type of underwater propulsion doesn't exist anymore. It was only in the Chronosaurids that this 4-limb propulsion existed. So new designs are being made by evolution through the Mesozoic. And we have what is the apex of the food pyramid is a lizard. This is really the time of lizards and dinosaurs. It's a good time. And that would have been it. The rest of history would have continued to be lizard and dinosaur dominated. But things started to decline in the Cretaceous. There was a decline of the dinosaurs. Angiosperms began to arise, and these angiosperms they didn't have the same kind of niches with the dinosaurs. So while cycads were likely dinosaur dispersed, and while many dinosaurs evolved to feed on gymnosperms and ferns and cycads, angiosperms were a new thing. And some hypothesize that the different chemicals produced by the angiosperms simply made them unpalatable to dinosaurs, which allowed them to do very well. These plants that dinosaurs couldn't eat became more prevalent. So one hypothesis is that dinosaurs declined a bit because they couldn't eat all the greenery. Now there's very little support for that because it's hard to show whether dinosaurs could eat or couldn't eat or how much they would starve. There are still plenty of ginkgos around, so there was plenty of food, but they may have been taking a bit of a hit from that. Close to the end of the Cretaceous, there was also a high level of volcanic activity, belching out toxic gases into the atmosphere, and kind of a greenhouse effect, causing a bit of a reduction in the number of dinosaur species. Mammals began to get more aggressive as well. Not aggressive enough to ever, eat a dinosaur, but aggressive enough to attack eggs and steal eggs from dinosaurs that weren't using brooding behavior. But plenty of dinosaurs were using brooding behavior. There were probably dinosaurs that were eating the early maples and oaks. There were probably dinosaurs that were perfectly capable of adapting to and living through the volcanic extinctions. There was a decline, and then there was an extinction event. And everything just went wrong. A huge meteor came out of the sky, smashing down the Yucatan Peninsula. When this meteor hit, it was able to cause a splash in the Earth's crust. I want to kind of think that one through for a moment. If you throw a rock into a pond, it'll have a splash. I want you to imagine that, but the splash instead being the Earth's crust. That the largest mountain range on Earth existed for a few minutes after this meteor hit the Earth and made a splashback of magma and Earth crust fragments. That when this came back down, it came back down in a massive collapse of a mountain range. Just imagine a whole mountain range that is, rising up, is completely unstable, and collapses into the sea, triggering massive tsunamis. these massive tsunamis would flood the inland sea of North America. So a wave going from the Yucatan Peninsula is sufficient to wash animals up across the shores of North America, resulting in the Hell Creek Formation. It's a place in, I think, Dakotas, maybe Montana. It could be Wyoming if I'm just completely off, but that spot. It's got all these marine animals that are washed up in there. So that's the first effect. So you have this massive explosion, tsunami, a huge blast just sterilizes everything within hundreds of miles. So just, everything within hundreds of miles of the blast is just gone, just nothing. It's just fire and ash drifting back into the stratosphere. Such an enormous hit into the Earth caused a backsplash. That backsplash was so severe that we do believe portions of the Earth ended up on Mars. So how would we gauge that? Well, there are portions of the Earth that went back into the atmosphere and then rained down. So this lava would come up from the Earth, a magma would be coming up from the Earth, going into the upper regions of the Earth's atmosphere, and would cool rapidly, making these very hard, small balls. And these very hard, small balls were found raining down. I can't remember the name of these things, but they were found raining down all over North America. There are fossils in the Hell Creek Formation of fish, which wouldn't have been found in Hell Creek at the time. That was far inland. They were fish with these little spheres in their gills. What happened? The fish were washed so far inland by the tsunami, and they were trying to still breathe when they got these little balls of molten material from the Yucatan Peninsula that had rained in a fiery apocalypse down on them in their gills. And then they were fossilized really fast by all the mud and debris that flowed. Not only this, but all this magma going out and erupting out around the Earth caused global fires as this cloud enveloped the Earth. The cloud, the way the Nova documentary, The Day the Dinosaurs Died, puts it, I'm going to link you to it. It's some good stuff, some high level right there. That cloud was enough to basically bake life on Earth. So the documentary was saying how the temperature in North America was 400 degrees Fahrenheit from a baking heat from above. Basically broiled the continents. Forest fires were started as far away as India. Most of the world's forests caught on fire. So we have a global fire event, a global cloud of ash, debris, raining down portions of the Earth's core. We've got this hot molten crater existing in the Yucatan Peninsula for thousands of years afterwards. This caused global primary productivity to just be absolute minimal. There was not much light getting through. So we're talking a complete shutdown of all primary producers. If you remember playing that card game in lab where we had the sunlight blocked by ash card, haha, I took out your primary producer. Imagine that, but like everywhere, for years. For years. Everything big starves. So all the higher trophic levels, out. All the large herbivores, out. Almost all the dinosaurs, out. So that was a global catastrophe that took minutes for an asteroid to go through the atmosphere and lasted for years. So yes, global warming is terrible, and yes, global epidemics are terrible, but asteroid, far, 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 far worse. And here's the fun part. Even though we had this extinction event, an extinction is a whole clade having no living members. So just whatever clade you're talking about, whether it be the golden toads of Central America, or whether it be the entire dinosaurid that is not bird, clade, no living members. Most of life on Earth died out during the Permian extinctions. Most dinosaurs died out during the Cretaceous Tertiary extinctions. And many other clades died out too. The plesiosaurs, the mosasaurs, the ichthyosaurs, the pterosaurs. If you had "saur" in your name, you're going to be sore after the extinction. You're going to be out. So that's what went on. It changed the course of life on Earth. Such that it changed the course of life on Earth so much that for that entire period from 235 million years ago to 65 million years ago, if I simply didn't cover that 170 million years, you could have a fine biology course. That's 170 million years. If I just didn't cover that, your biology course would be just fine. If we just went, advanced slide, to the birds. If we skipped all the dinosaurs and just went to the birds, it would still be a fine biology course. That's how severe extinction is. But we're covering birds now. The surviving dinosaurs. So they've got uric acid excretion. It's highly water efficient. In fact, this is one of those adaptations to living in a xeric environment, a desert environment, living with desiccation, that uric acid is highly efficient for excretion. Good way of getting rid of excess nitrogen. Insects use it too. These organisms are endotherms, mostly toothless. We'd be silly if we didn't add, light. And they have a very high metabolism rate, too, because they're endothermic. And because they're flying, especially birds like this, a hummingbird, that are capable of pollinating things by hovering, this is a high amount of metabolism that they would require. So large energy requirements from these birds. All right, advanced slide. So extinction, so we're going to just talk kind of briefly, this is just a fun little exercise. Extinction's forever. What I also want to point out, though, is our dinosaur fossils. We draw these pictures of what dinosaurs look like based on their bones. Here are some modern creatures that we're drawing. What do they look like based on their bones? So here we have creature number 1. So try to guess it. Please don't just play with the slides. Let's have some fun here. Creature number 1, advanced slide. That's a baboon. Yep. Advanced slide down. Creature number 2. What on earth is that? That is some weird looking animal. That is a zebra. Creature number 3. Advance again. That horrific skull-faced animal looking into the very depths of your soul. Advance down. That's a cat. Yeah, kind of fun. This would be a lot more fun in class, wouldn't it? Stupid COVID. All right, keep advancing. What are these things? Are these knife-like hands they use for stabbing fish? Those are swans. Yeah, this one's really fun. What the heck is that? It's got its gigantic nasal aperture right in the center of its face and these bestial tusks. And that's an elephant. Last one, I swear. That thing, it's some sort of cute little mammal that is actually an iguana. I don't know, I had fun with these. I really wish you could do this in class. All right, advanced slide to rise of the mammals. Milk from modified sweat glands, mammary glands, mammals. So they produce milk. It's a special adaptation. They actually have this internal fertilization, and often, but not always, they're viviparous. They give live birth. So that's another adaptation for living on land, is just give live birth. Don't worry about putting your eggs out there. Just keep your eggs in there and do the whole thing internally. Use the cuticle, and use the skin, and use the hair and fat for insulation of that, as opposed to leaving your eggs out. So this is an adaptation used by mammals, and then an increased amount of nutrition by milk. Hair and subcutaneous fat. Adaptations for living in both hot and cold and dry environments. So you can have a hot and cold environment. Subcutaneous fat and hair helps insulation for either, and then a very dry environment. Hair is going to help for that. And for dry as well, the kidney functions. Efficient kidney, not using uric acid level efficiency, but still a highly efficient kidney, very effective water reabsorption. Often, but not always, mammals have increased parental care. Some of them are very social creatures, and these can help them live in dry environments or live on Earth. All right, go down one, and let's talk about the adaptive radiation of mammals. So you've got these relatively uninteresting kind of egg-stealing, seed-eating little guys living around the feet of the great dinosaurs. Then this massive extinction event occurs, just kind of resets the board. You know, rage throw the chessboard and have to re-put new pieces on. Now you have an adaptive radiation of mammals. So the mammal expansion occurs after the dinosaurs have gone extinct. It just so happens that a lot of the mammalian traits were exaptations for the environment foisted upon them by the massive Cretaceous Tertiary explosion. Luck. Short way of saying that. Luck. What would happen if a massive meteor hit now? Well, it's entirely likely that the mammals would survive, but it's also possible other things would survive. What would happen if another permanent extinction had happened? Well, the mammals would probably die out and be replaced by something else. Something else could come. My bet's on squid. I mean, I don't have any reason for that. I just think they're nifty. But anyway, they are empty niches after a global extinction. Surviving cold weather, drought, and scant resources favored some of the mammals that would survive. Not all mammals survived. We later see a great adaptation of mammals, and we have three groups of mammals here. The monotremes, the echidna and the platypus, basically the Australian jokes of mammals. They are down in Australia, and they're relatively limited clade. They're similar to what the early mammals looked like. So they use amniotic eggs too. So they lay amniotic eggs. They don't have that internal eggs that the rest of the mammals do. Then you have the marsupials. Internal eggs, kind of factory line kind of approach here. If the animals get inseminated, they produce an egg, they produce an embryo. The embryo crawls up front and goes into a pouch. The pouch will contain that marsupial animal for a certain amount of time, and it'll be able to be weaned in there and then leave. So kind of an extended way of keeping it inside, just with a pouch instead of an egg. And then you have the placental mammals, the eutherians as it's calling it here, and these animals have the placenta. They all have internal fertilization, but they don't have any eggs. They just kind of have the internal maintenance of the embryo until it is ready, and then vivipary occurs, and then boom, there you go. So, and make it sound so simple. What happened though is some of these animals were separated by biogeography. So the marsupial mammals were common globally and were replaced by placentals in Eurasia, Africa, and North America, leaving the marsupials in Australia and South America. Later, when the Isthmus of Panama arose, you will find more fossils of placental mammals going down into South America, and you find one marsupial making its way to North America, that which we call the possum. Respect your possum, because they traveled all the way from South America to be North America's premier marsupial. Yeah, kind of nifty. 3 different clades of mammals, know them to an extent. All right, ecology and evolution. Yes, like this whole class could just be called ecology and evolution. Let's talk about how evolution affects ecology. How new niches getting filled changes an ecosystem. So an ecosystem is the abiotic and biotic factors that make up a region. All the animals, soil, oxygen content of the air, rainfall, all of that is the ecosystem. The ecosystem of old waters was, well, low, murky, poorly mixed, low oxygen kind of areas. Cyanobacteria would produce a certain amount of oxygen, but not enough oxygen in the water to really support a lot of eukaryotic life. Suspension feeders, such as sponges and clams, evolved and began to feed on all this cyanobacteria. And what that did was it reduced the amount of cyanobacteria present, and then new organisms could now inhabit those oceans, such as eukaryotic algae, because they're clear and well mixed oceans. So with higher oxygen content, you've got more eukaryotic algae, and later you could only get fish because there were suspension feeders such as sponges and clams. You may remember from earlier the oxygen crisis. That eukaryotes couldn't have colonized land. In fact, eukaryotes probably couldn't have existed had it not been for cyanobacteria changing the amount of oxygen present on Earth. So the oxygen crisis was an evolution of photosynthesis changing the ecology of, well, Earth, even the geology to an extent. We also have, advanced slide, to evolution changes the ecology here, herbivores. Here we have a patch of land that has been kept free from geese. So herbivores will change a region by, well, eating the plants, removing the plants, and which will change the oxygen content of the area because you have fewer plants doing stuff. They'll change the carbon cycling, will change the nitrogen cycling, phosphorus cycling. All of these things change when herbivores eat all their plants. But predators can control the populations of herbivores. So let's say you take this area with plentiful herbivores and you introduce some coyotes, foxes, other mid-level predators to eat the herbivores. That's going to change the plants. Changing the plants is going to open more niches for things like pollinators. So the presence of herbivores can inhibit the presence of pollinators. The evolution of herbivores changed the dynamics of plants. The evolution of fungi that can digest lignin changed the deposition of carbon and changed the global carbon cycle. The evolution of new traits allows for the change in ecology. And what we have now is only a palimpsest of all these different changes. A palimpsest is like when you take, if you take a scroll and you write a whole bunch on it, you erase most of it and then rewrite on it. You'll still see traces of the original writing underneath the new writing. So what we have now is a complex ecosystem based on years and years of ecological interactions evolving into new ecological interactions and causing new ecological interactions to evolve. So it's a complex series of systems that have now caused our beautiful and glorious ecosystem. So really, we've gone from prokaryotes inhabiting a hostile Earth with no oxygen through a period of great trees that fell and never rotted because there was no fungi. We've gone through times dominated by jawed, armored, massive fishes to times dominated by awesome dinosaurs to this modern Earth that we have. Will there be another extinction event? Yes, you're in one. You're in the 6th great extinction event. An extinction event caused by one species that just has really no regard for others. I'm not talking about honey badger doesn't give a crap. I'm talking about humans. We are changing ecology through the evolution of our ability to harness new types of power, new types of energy, and to re-release carbon into the atmosphere. We're changing ecology. We're changing the very course of evolution. But this is not a new tune. There will be more evolution. There will be new things. I mean, we might cause ourselves to go to extinction, but remember, life abides. Earth abides. The dude abides. Advanced slide. That's it. So that's 2 weeks. 2 weeks worth of hypothetical closures after spring break. If you're sick and you've been watching some of these, I really hope you get well. If you're healthy and you've been watching some of these, I really hope you come back. Let's see what we can do for the next week. So hope you got your comments on Monday about where we're going to go from here. So yeah, maybe we'll Instagram it. Maybe we'll just keep on doing this. Listen, I know that it would be much better to see each other in person, but you get what you get. This is what we have. Miss you bunches. See you later.